Raise your hand if you've currently been tuned into Love Island, or maybe you've been tuned into the World Cup, or maybe you needed something to eat, possibly do laundry, or maybe you just needed to charge your phone. Just raise your hand if you use something that required electricity just from today. Hi, my name is Madison Nguyen, and I'm currently an incoming fourth-year electrical engineering major here at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And I'm currently interning at an electric utility company called Silicon Valley Power, which sparked my interest in transmission and power distribution. But I'll be showing you guys today how electricity reaches your home from power plant to the plug. But before we even talk about the distribution of electricity, we have to talk about how electricity is even generated. And according to the US Energy Information Administration, electricity in the United States comes from a mix of energy sources, including natural gas plants, solar, wind power, hydroelectric power, and nuclear power. But even though all of these are different types of sources we get our electricity from, they all go into the same electric grid here within the United States. But now I'll be talking about a few examples of these power plants. So if you look at the first photo, that is a photo of a natural gas power plant which burns fuel and that creates steam, which spins turbines, and the turbines produce electricity. The second photo, you've probably seen them before, but they are solar panels, and solar panels convert sunlight directly into electricity. The third photo is wind power, or in that example, that's a windmill, but windmills use wind to turn turbine blades, and those turbine blades produce electricity. The fourth one, which is pretty cool, it's a hydroelectric power plant, which uses moving water to spin turbines, and those turbines produce electricity. And the last photo, the fifth photo, is a nuclear power plant, which uses heat from nuclear fission, and that creates heat. The heat turns into steam, and the steam spins turbines. So now we're going to be talking about the distribution of electricity, and this is where electricity journey begins. And according to Thomas A. Short, the distribution systems are responsible for delivering electricity directly to customers, but the power plant has a miniature substation within it, which has a transformer that steps the electricity produced to a higher voltage. That high voltage then runs through a transmission line, which goes to a local substation. For example, Silicon Valley Power owns some substations. PG&E, you've probably heard, that is the main electric distributor here in Northern California. Southern California Edison is also an electric distribution company in Southern California. But yeah, the right-hand side is an example, or the right-hand image is an example of a substation, what an example of a substation is. And the left photo is a picture of a high voltage transmission line. But the next slide is about the residential distribution. So after being at a substation, or after the electricity is at a substation, the substation then steps down the voltage to a lower voltage. And then that lower voltage then goes through a tinier substation, which then steps down the voltage again to an even lower voltage. That voltage then goes through your residential neighborhoods. And on the right-hand side is a high voltage transformer, which is typically found at a substation to step down a voltage or maybe even step up voltage. The bottom right photo is a high voltage transmission line example. And then on the left-hand side are transmission lines that are typically found within a residential neighborhood. If you don't see overhead transmission lines hanging over you, it is most likely that they are also underground as well. And now we're going to be talking about the voltage that goes into your home. So a transformer steps down the voltage to a nominal voltage your house needs. And in the US, it is typically 120 to 240 volts in a residential home. And these transformers can be found either within the transmission lines or it could be next to your house local. It doesn't have to be completely next to your house, but it could be somewhere in within that area. On the right-hand side, that image is an example of what a transmission or sorry, a transformer box looks like. And then once that transformer steps down the voltage to the 120 to 240 volts, and it gets read by a electricity meter, which just reads off the voltage. That voltage then reaches a breaker panel, and a breaker panel basically distributes electricity throughout the house and protects the circuits by shutting off power if there is an overload or an overcurrent drive. And that is pretty much the end of the journey. So once the breaker panel detects it, it then goes and distributes to your outlets in your home. But why does electricity matter? Why is it so important? And we overlook these reasons a lot. But first, reliable energy is something we depend on every day. Most of us don't really think of twice about when we charge our phones, when we use our computers, or even turn on lights. It also powers services like hospitals, where electricity keeps equipment running, and schools where students rely heavily on computers, lighting, and internet access. Businesses also depend on electricity to operate. For example, grocery stores need to keep their food refrigerated. And according to Alexandra Class, her co-authors in the Stanford Law Reviews uh, state that maintaining a reliable electric grid is becoming very important as our energy system continues to grow. And without a reliable electric grid, many of the things that we use every day just wouldn't work. And that is the entire reason why we need electricity. We need it to survive in this day and age, and it is pretty important. But that is pretty much the end of my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much.